something I said to.
And your daughter?
Okay.
Oh.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Before we begin, I'd like everybody to turn off their cell phones and electronic devices, at least put them on silent. Thank you. Today with us today is Jorge Augusto, representing Russell Redding, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Tim Reese, State Treasurer, and Bob Coyne, representing Eileen McNulty, the Secretary of Revenue. Thank you all for coming. Quorum of the board being present, I'll call today's meeting to order. First, the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we have two scheduled hearings. The first hearing is going to pertain to the amended joint petition concerning the proposed change of control at the Meadows. And the second hearing will be Chester Downs and Marina LLC seeking the approval to modify the gaming floor at Harrah's, Philadelphia. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone who's going to speak to please stand, state your name and spell it for the court reporter prior to your presentations. Harrah's present. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong one. Okay, right. The Meadows is here. Could we have all the non-attorneys here on behalf of the Meadows who might possibly be speaking to Chester, sorry, we switched the order.
We're more than Meadows.
I'm sorry. That's okay.
Thank you.
That's a $5 fine.
Oh, boy. We have the people from Meadows, the non-attorneys, please stand and be sworn and state your name for the court reporter. First to be sworn. Okay, you may begin, please.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. Marie Jones from Fox Rothschild here on behalf of Washington Trotting Association. With me today from WTA is Guy Hillier, Executive Vice President for Cannery Casino Resorts, and Sean Sullivan, General Manager of Washington Trotting Association. We'd first like to thank the board staff, specifically the Division of Licensing, Office of Enforcement Counsel, and Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement for their thorough and expedited review of this matter. It's been a journey to get us here for final approval today, but we're very pleased to be here and looking forward to the future of the Meadows facility and their partnership with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As the chairman indicated, we're here for final approval of the transaction between Washington Trotting Association and Gaming and Leisure and Partners, Inc. and Pinnacle Entertainment. Specifically, we're asking for approval of GLPI and related entities as suitable for licensure as a passive landlord in connection with the transaction. Approval of Pinnacle and related entities and individuals as suitable for licensure and as a Category 1 licensee to operate the WTA in the Meadows facility through Pinnacle Development 33 LLC, including, of course, table games. And last but not least, we're asking for the assessment of a reduced licensing fee in connection with the board's previous practices in connection with this transaction. With that, I'll turn it over to GLPI to present there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, my name is Jim Doherty from Doherty Hayes, and I'm here today on behalf of GLPI. We would like to echo the sentiment expressed by Attorney Jones regarding the hard work and dedication your staff has shown to really move this forward as quickly as possible. And we appreciate all those steps along the way. As part of our presentation today, Attorney Brandon Moore will be addressing the GLI components, and I'd like to turn the presentation to him over at this time, and I can assure you it will be very brief to move this along.
Brandon Moore, General Counsel, Gaming and Leisure Properties. I know we've been in front of the board and certainly with the staff with this transaction for the better part of 2 years, and we very much appreciate the patience and professionalism that we've had as this thing is twisted and turned along the way. And as my final thank you, I will promise I will not go through all the slides I typically go through and tell you all about the transaction and who we are. So what I will do is just give you a little bit of update, which I think will be a nice segue into our friends at Pinnacle as to what we've done at GLPI since the last time we were here. And what we've done in the last year primarily is we entered into a transaction with Pinnacle Entertainment whereby we purchased the land and building associated with 14 of their properties, and they became another very large tenant in our portfolio along with Penn National Gaming. In connection with that, we developed quite a partnership with the folks at Pinnacle, and as we were going through this MEADOWS process and vetting various third-party operators, as you know, there was different times we were considering owning and operating this property ourselves versus bringing in a tenant. That was not something that the Office of Enforcement Counsel and others on the staff felt was consistent with where we were at the spinoff, and we did not have that goal as a business to operate this thing long-term. We were able to reach an agreement with the folks at Pinnacle before the closing of our transaction for their other facilities, and that's brought us to where we are today. So we're excited to have them. We have a great relationship with them, and we're excited to continue to work with them, and we hope that you'll find them a great partner here in Pennsylvania. We've included a couple of slides that show just some of the statistics of how we've grown as a triple net REIT and what we're doing today. And we've included the map, which I always bring. I thought you would miss it if I didn't show it. Now it's got a few more stars, and you can see where the Pinnacle properties have added to our portfolio. And so unless there are any questions for me about the transaction or the arrangement with Pinnacle, I think it's probably best for us to turn it over to them and let them tell you a little bit about who they are.
Thank you, Brandon. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Andrew Giorgione. I'm an attorney with Buchanan, Ingersoll & Rooney, and we represent Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc. Anthony Sanfilippo, as the CEO, is here to introduce his team members and to talk about the application on behalf of Pinnacle. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Andy.
As each of you are going to be testifying, would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter so we know
We are
who's speaking?
happy to do that. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is Anthony Sanfilippo. I am the CEO of Pinnacle Entertainment. You spell my last name Sanfilippo. With me, and I'll have them each give the spelling of their name, is to your very right, Donna Negrato, who is our newly appointed, she's been with our company for 19 years, general counsel. And then to my immediate left is Rod Centers, and Rod has been with our company for a number of years, most recently as the general manager of our property in Kansas City, Missouri. He is, pending approval from you all, will be the general manager of our property here at the Meadows, and I'll talk about that here in a second. And then next to me is Carlos Ruiz Sanchez, who is the president of the company and the chief financial officer. And Donna, why don't we start with you to provide spelling?
Sure. It's my last name is Negrato, Negrotto.
Hi, good morning. Rod Centers, Centers.
Good morning. Carlos Ruiz Sanchez, that's Ruisanchez.
Thank you.
Good morning again. We are very pleased to be here, and I'd really like to start by thanking Kevin O'Toole and the staff of the Pennsylvania Gaming
group, they have been just terrific. We, across the board, and all of our dealings through the investigative process, through just the interaction on the application and leading up to this moment, have been professional. They have been timely. They've been courteous, and the many people on our staff who have dealt with Kevin and Cyrus and others they wanted me to make sure that we told you just how terrific it has been to deal with you, and how professional and engaging that everyone's been. So thank you for that, and thank you to Kevin, and it's a pleasure for us to be here. This is our 10th jurisdiction that we will be in. I want to take a second and say that we have had an integration process with the team at the Meadows. There's 1,300 team members there. Sean Sullivan has been terrific in helping us get to know the folks at the Meadows, and pending your approval, we are ready to fully engage and become part of, have the Meadows become part of the Pinnacle Entertainment family. Sean is going to stay on with our company. I've asked Sean if he would do that and help us in other parts of the company, as well as continuing to be based in the Pittsburgh area. Sean, we think is terrific, but he doesn't understand the capabilities that we have built from a company standpoint. And we are a company with 15 other locations that do a number of things to, we believe, run our business in a high level that happens because of what we call the service center that's out of Las Vegas, and that includes a number of different functions. Sean and other key leaders of the Meadows have been to Las Vegas. We've hosted them there. We've shown them what we do at the service center. We have also hosted them at our Belterra Park and Belterra Resort property in the Cincinnati area, just as part of the get to know one another. Rod understands the capabilities that we have from a company perspective, and we're pleased that Sean is going to continue to work with us as this transaction takes place. But we thought it was in the best interest of this transaction to have Rod, who understands Pinnacle and the capabilities of Pinnacle, to step in the role of general manager. Now, you'll hear from Rod here in a few minutes, but I am pleased that Sean is going to continue on with Pinnacle Entertainment. Very first slide, which would be page 6 in front of you, shows the breadth of our company. This will be the 16th location. We operate today in Louisiana, Colorado, Indiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Iowa, Nevada, and Texas. This will be our 3rd horse racing facility. We have 2 other horse racing facilities. And we're hoping with your approval that we'll become the owners of the operations of the Meadows on Friday. The next page will show you some select properties that we have in our portfolio. We have multiple brands, all under Pinnacle Entertainment, and really all covered by our loyalty program, which is called My Choice. We are going to integrate the Meadows with our loyalty program. All of our properties are linked throughout our system, so that if a guest plays at any one property, they get credit for it throughout the system. We expect that we're going to have guests who, in our Chicagoland property or our St. Louis or our Kansas City area properties, come to Pittsburgh and play for a number of reasons. The entertainment that's in the Pittsburgh area, what occurs with the sports that are here. We're in a lot of towns that are big sports towns, and we think that we're going to see quite a bit of cross-property play, which will be helpful for the business. On this page, the 2 properties you see, one is in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and one is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Baton Rouge is our more recent property of the 2. It's 4 years old. The one on the left, Lake Charles, is a full resort with a golf course, spa, and you can see from the photo that's there, it has a lazy river. I mentioned St. Louis. We have 2 terrific properties in the St. Louis area. Ameristar, which is in St. Charles, and then River City. Ameristar is part of a group of properties that we acquired a little bit more than 3 years ago when we purchased the company Ameristar, and we have fully integrated that into our company, including the My Choice system player loyalty program that I mentioned to you. And then River City is a property that we've developed over the last 6 years. It is 6 years old. In Kansas City, you can see on that next page, we have an Ameristar property in Kansas City where Rod did come from. It's the largest under roof from a square feet standpoint of any property that we have. It's a little bit more than 2 million square feet. It's a very large property and a very large casino with multiple restaurants and an entertainment facility. And then the property on the other side of the page in Florence, Indiana, is Belterra Resort, which, just like our Lake Charles property, has a golf course, a spa, multiple restaurants, and we very much operate it as a full-service resort and convention center. We have a lot of business that is really non-gaming related. I mentioned we have 2 racing operations, a racetrack that's in Selma, Texas, which is Retama Park. It's both quarter horse racing and thoroughbred racing. We just started the thoroughbred season this past Friday. There is not any gaming that is there other than parimutuel betting, but it is a property that we've now owned for a little bit more than 4 years that we thought was an important property for us to acquire in Texas. And then Belterra Park is a property that we completely leveled it. It was formerly known as River Downs, and we rebuilt it to the facility that it is today. We built it in a way that we can expand it as time goes on, including adding a hotel. We've got a footprint for a hotel, and it is the only turf course that's in the state of Ohio, and the racing there is all thoroughbred racing. The next 2 slides really talk about who we are from a company standpoint. We really start with the culture of the company. We're very proud of team members that as a terrific place for us to work. And when we make decisions, we focus on really 3 things. We focus on our team members, we focus on our guests, and we focus on our shareholders. We are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ exchange. And when we make decisions, we look at all 3 of these groups and say, are we making a decision that's in the best interest of one of more of these groups? And then we live by the company values that we have. You can see the 5 values listed at the bottom of the page: integrity, excellence, care, innovation, and ownership. An example of care is the recent flooding that occurred in the Baton Rouge area. We, as a company, reached out to our team members and said, for every $1 that a team member will donate, we'll match $1. The company would match $1. And we were able to raise about $450,000, which we actually distributed yesterday to impacted team members. Over 80 team members had their homes flooded. And if you can just imagine having a home flooded and you have to take everything out of it, and you have to take all the sideboard out of that home and then dry it and rebuild it, we were able to distribute to team members close to $7,000 for those that own their home. And then we distributed half that amount that those that were renting their home. So it was a really terrific day yesterday in Baton Rouge, where we were able to help a number of team members through the efforts of those of us that donated, and then the company matching that donation. And then the last slide that I'm going to talk about is celebrating team member success. We post all of the promotions that occur. We first look internally before we promote a team member, and then we let everybody know who's been promoted. And in 15, we had 979 team members internally promoted company-wide. And we talk about a part of what we talk about is be the best you. We talk about helping people achieve the professional success that they'd like to have, and really supporting them to live the best personal life that they can live. I'm going to turn it over to Rod. We're really pleased to have Rod here. He raised his hand and said, when this opportunity came up, I would like to be considered to be the general manager in Pittsburgh. I think it's a property that I can be a great part of and would look forward to it. And he has done such a terrific job for us. He has most recently, as I said, in Kansas City. Prior to that, he was our general manager in Bossier City, Louisiana, at our Boomtown property. So I'm pleased to have Rod with us and turn the presentation over to Rod.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning. I'd like to take a couple moments and talk to you about our Pinnacle Cares, our community involvement aspect of who we are as a company and what we focus on. Our Pinnacle Cares giving focus really centers around a few key areas for us. Veterans, serving those who served, seniors, helping our senior citizens and friends, strengthen our communities and becoming a strong community partner, cancer, supporting efforts of finding a cure for this horrible disease, and food, helping feed the needy and spreading love with food. Those are the primary focus areas in which our Pinnacle Cares campaign centers around. And to facilitate this, we use three primary drivers or vehicles, if you will. First is our giving campaign. Annually, each team member has a chance, an opportunity to contribute financially to help those in need. Our team members have a chance to choose a local and or a national charity to donate to. And Pinnacle as a company matches all those donations by 25%. Our Pinnacle Entertainment Foundation, and I'll give you a specific example of this one in a moment. The foundation gives financial contributions to both national and local charities. And then a Pinnacle Cares activity is localized to each property. And through our volunteer program, our 15,000 team members have the opportunity to donate their time to help the community and others in need, as well as each property has a process to donate financially to local communities in need. A specific example of the Pinnacle Foundation, early one morning, I received a phone call when I was in Kansas City as the general manager, and Don Bosco is a local organization that helps feed senior citizens in the area. And for many cases, the senior citizens' only hot meal a day they receive from Don Bosco. The phone call informed me that their vehicle had been stolen early that morning, and they had no way to deliver the food to the seniors. We got in touch with Anthony and our steward group, our leadership team, and within 8 hours, we donated a new vehicle and food warmers to that organization. The emotions surrounded by it were just incredible. Very powerful day. Very proud as a member of the Pinnacle team, and our team members very proud in the community that we were able to do that. Huge donation with relative efficiency that was just unheard of. From a diversity standpoint, it's something that we keep top of mind each and every day, and it really for us starts at the top. As you can see, our board members, both from a gender and ethnicity standpoint, we distribute diversity, and those with our steward group make sure that diversity is on top of mind each and every day in all aspects of our business. From a team member standpoint, of our 15,000 team members, 48% are ethnically diverse and 51% are female team members, and you can see there on the pie chart how it breaks down. The MEADOWS is a fantastic organization in terms of their commitment to diversity as well, and we will continue to drive that commitment and enhance it as well. So all the things that the MEADOWS does today will stay in place, as well as some accelerated diversity activity as well. And then from a supplier, a spend diversity standpoint, in 2015, we spent $88 million with minority and women-owned businesses. Supplier diversity is actually ingrained in our culture and top of our mind through our procurement process. We consistently outperform goals, even in jurisdictions where that may not be a requirement. And Pinnacle hosts the largest supplier diversity fair in the state of Missouri. And then you can see in the pie charts there some of our larger jurisdictions where we fare. Louisiana at 45%, Indiana, Ohio at 21%, and Missouri at 32%. MEWBE spend. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Donna to talk about our compliance processes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. I want to spend a few minutes talking about a couple topics that are extremely important to Pinnacle, and I'm sure important to you as well. Compliance, and it's not only important to the company, but to me personally. I'm the chairman of the compliance committee, our corporate compliance committee. That committee is formed with Carlos Ruiz Sanchez, who is the president and also a board member. Myself, another independent board member, our VP of Compliance and Internal Audit, and then we also have another independent individual who actually is the former chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission. So we have quite a high-quality group of people in that committee. We have a high-quality compliance program, then the Compliance Committee is given the mandate to make sure that we follow that program. We meet quarterly. A good bit of what we do ends up being vendor review, employee review, transaction review, but we also will also handle any matters of regulatory or other compliance issues that may arise in the quarter. So, that's where it starts at the top, where we have a huge commitment to compliance there. We have obviously policies and practices as it relates to state, local, and federal, any regulation, any requirements we have. Very strong policies and practices, and then to back that up, we have training, and our line employees, all of them, receive training in each jurisdiction. If there's specific regulatory requirements, obviously they receive training in that, but also in anti-money laundering, Title 31, all the other requirements. Do a good bit of live training, but also do a good bit of training online so that the team members can do their training when it's best suited for them, but we can also track it and make sure that they are meeting the requirements. And then finally, we have a very active internal audit group. It's 24 members. They go back and check and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And they are a great help in real time as they go through the processes and our policies to make sure that we're in compliance. And to the extent we find anything that is deficient, then we have the ability real time to make changes to it. The next topic I'm going to address is responsible gaming. Another topic that is important and that we do take seriously here at Pinnacle. Each of our employees will receive responsible gaming training initially at their orientation, and then actually yearly they receive that same training. The training includes red flags for problem gaming, characteristics of a problem gambler, things like that, so that they can help spot those people to assist. We also annually participate in the AGA-sponsored Responsible Gaming Week, which highlights all of the programs available to people, and it also sparks an enhanced awareness so that, again, it kind of becomes top of mind again to all of our employees. And then we also, throughout all of our properties, have brochures and available 1-800 numbers and for team members and guests, so that if they do in fact need assistance, that it's readily available to them. So that's just some of the things we do as it relates to responsible gaming. And with that, I will pass it to our esteemed president, Carlos, and let him go through some financial information.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, members of the staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. If you look at our company, we have gone through an evolution over the last 6 years. When Anthony Sanfilippo had first joined Pinnacle, and from there we've evolved in a very meaningful way as a company to being a relatively large regional operator within the United States, and have grown our company from 8 properties and now hopefully later on this week to our 16th property. That has happened both through development of facilities that we built from the ground up, as well as acquisitions that have been made similar to the one that we're here to talk about today. Through that, we have focused on trying to enhance the position of our existing facilities. They generally have been best in class assets, and we've looked to improve them through better operations and trying to leverage the scale and the safety, if you will, of a company that gets bigger over time. From that, our margins have improved from about 16% back in the year in 2009 to about 27% this year over the last 12 months. And through that, we've grown from a company with about $500 million of revenue to one that hopefully following this transaction will be about $2.5 billion in revenue. Generally, our strategy has been try to take good businesses and make them better. and do that in a broad basis, being very prudent about how we leverage our balance sheet and try to take advantage of what certainly today is low cost environment on the debt side, to make sure that we maintain our properties and continue to position them to continue to grow. Through that, we have 15 resorts, gaming facilities throughout the businesses that we operate. This would be a 16th, as we've mentioned. Not a single one makes up more than 15% of its revenue, and that's before of this transaction. Following this, that number will go down to about 13. We've had the benefit of having either number one or number two in the markets that we're in about 3/4 of the time, accounting for over 3/4 of our cash flow, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to have Meadows join that position as it would fit in that category. We have done this really without stretching our financial resources, and we are leveraged today about 3.5 times cash flow. That will be about the same number following this transaction, and that's critically important, as we have done a reasonable job, better than some of our competitors, on maintaining our facilities, continuing to invest to make sure that not only are you dealing with the maintenance that needs to take place every year, but ways to grow it, ways to be different and continue to delight guests as part of their entertainment experience outside the home. And we're thrilled to have the opportunity to build on what has been clearly a great foundation that the Meadows has established over the years that it's been open here in the state. Overall, our strategy, it fits exactly what you see us do here today. Continue to acquire other businesses, try to leverage the scale of our company, having the benefit of seeing 16 different businesses throughout the U.S., try to get best practices as ways to continue to grow the business and leverage our economies of scale, buying power in order to drive efficiencies and improve businesses as we go. And do that in a way where we're not, none of these transactions are betting the company or being very cognizant of the fact that businesses ebb and flow, and you have to be able to work through the tough times just as well, if not better, than the times that things are going great. Through that, you've seen a consistent growth in our company as a whole, size and profile and efficiencies throughout the last 6 years that this management team has been in place. And from that, this has gone through not only various cycles that we clearly have been in our economy, but you can see that there have been improvements really at every stage, a step of the way throughout. And a lot of acquisitions that we've actually have put in and integrated, I would tell you that based on our experience and what we've seen, this would be the smoothest that we've had, in part due to how well the Meadows is run today, and also the opportunity to actually plan properly in order to be ready to hit the ground running, hopefully at the time this closes. As I mentioned, we have a market-leading position in the vast majority of our places. And we're excited about the market in Pennsylvania and what it will mean for our company as a whole, and things that we can bring to continue to improve the Meadows and continue the trajectory that they have been over the last several years. And finally, just to summarize, we have a really high-quality portfolio of businesses that start out with being in terrific bricks and mortar, with businesses with a culture and a team in place, team members that really do care and love being part of this company. And it's part of that shows every day in the type of service that they provide to our guests, and it's part of what continues our guests coming back to us as their favorite place to be in the markets that we do that. We've done that prudently with a really strong balance sheet. We're very committed to have a very moderate leverage of our company in order to make sure that we can go through good times and bad times, as they eventually always come. And we've had a track record and a leadership team that is committed to making sure that all these businesses continue to thrive as a company. And all of us as owners, partial owners of this business, are committed to make sure that it's here for the very long term in the best place that it can be. And as part of that, we are thrilled to have the opportunity to welcome the Meadows into the portfolio of businesses that we have, and look for ways to make this a great partnership with the state, as well as with our team members and our guests throughout our company.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments from Enforcement Council?
I do have a few questions. John Crowe, CROHE for the Office of Enforcement Council. If I can go back, or if you can go back to slide 23, I had a question specifically from that. There you go. In the bottom right under 2016, looking forward, you reference capitalizing on organic growth opportunities. I was just wondering if you could speak specifically to what organic growth opportunities you would like to capitalize on in Western Pennsylvania.
I'm happy to address that. You know, we are spending time. We've been able to spend quite a bit of time. And again, thank you to the staff for allowing us to spend time. Rod's been at the property. We think that there's opportunities to enhance entertainment at the Meadows. As you know, there is a hotel that is a third-party hotel. It's a Hyatt Place hotel that is attached to the Meadows. We look at food and beverage, and we look at entertainment venues that would enhance the growth of the Meadows. Currently, there is a tent that houses entertainment that's there now, and I know over this weekend, Kool and the Gang was performed, and it was a great success, and that was done at trackside. We'll look specifically at enhancing at the Meadows food and beverage outlets, as well as an entertainment venue. Those would be the first things that we look at. We'll also look at making sure that the gaming floor is fresh, that the floor has an appropriate amount of fresh games that are on the floor. We'll look at programs that are there that have to do with, I mentioned earlier, our loyalty program. We're going to implement by April 1st. It'll happen April 1st, our My Choice loyalty program. We think that's going to help quite a bit. That program, the top level is actually, it's called the Owners Club level. So if you qualify for the top level, you're part of the Owners Club. And as part of that, we actually provide the person that reaches that 100 shares of Pinnacle Entertainment stock. We're the only company I know that does this, and we've looked. So you actually become an owner of Pinnacle Entertainment if you reach that level. And then another benefit is we lease. They have a choice of one of 4 Mercedes-Benz models. We'll lease for them a Mercedes-Benz. They just have to pay their personal insurance, but we provide them a Mercedes-Benz. We have trips that come with that. But implementing our loyalty program, we think will have a lot of benefit too.
You mentioned specifically looking at fresh or new games. Do you anticipate a change to the number of table games or slot machines at the facility, or likewise a change to the size of the gaming floor itself?
No, it's a very large gaming floor. It's almost 3,200 slot machines, and with poker, about 85 table games. I think it's too early for us to have a really definitive point of view on what should be the right size of the floor, whether it's larger or whether it's smaller. That's something we'll look at from the standpoint of how the floor itself is laid out.
Okay, and you spoke about looking at entertainment specifically regarding the growth opportunities for the Meadows. Do you have any specific plans for an upgrade or a change to the facility itself, or a specific amenity that you plan on adding?
I've talked with Sean Enron about where the tent facility is now, and we don't have any specific plans, but we'll look at a permanent facility to see how that might look in that spot. So, and that would be a multi-purpose event center that would in addition for concerts, it would also be used for as a conference center, and we believe that there could be the need for that, but we'll work with those at the property to further explore that.
And that's something that theoretically could replace the existing, what's a tent facility?
Yeah, it would replace that tent that's there.
Do you anticipate any changes to the number of employees, either full-time or part-time at the facility? Would Pinnacle taking control of the Meadows facility affect employment there in any way?
It is today. It's right at 1,300 team members. We don't anticipate that we would see a change that would be considered material.
And will the programs or plans for items such as healthcare or the employee reward program that you were speaking about earlier offered to the WTA team members remain the same, or would it change to be more akin to other Pinnacle facilities?
I'll start with healthcare. We have a healthcare program. We are self-insured, and all of our team members throughout the company, and all of us, including myself and those sitting at this table, participate in the same healthcare and that healthcare program is priced according to how much you make. So if you make $30,000 or below, you pay a lower rate. If you make up to $75,000, you pay a next rate. If you make more than $75,000, you pay a little bit higher rate. We anticipate that come April, because there is a insurance plan that's in place right now that runs through March, that the team members at the Meadows will come onto the same plan that we have company-wide for Pinnacle Entertainment team members. So that would most likely begin in April after the current plan expires. That's in place. Other benefits, and I'll give you an example. We promote quite a bit your personal life and your professional life, and personal time off. You acquire hours for personal time off. We know that the Pinnacle plan is more generous than the plan at the Meadows. So we know that that's going to be a step up for those at the Meadows on the number of hours that they're going to be able to accrue for personal time off. In our company, anybody that's at a certain level, which is basically director or above, and they get equity in the company, we don't have we say take off when you want to take off. We don't say you only get so many hours off. We really promote for folks that are to be owners of the company. They receive stock in the company. We want them to act like an owner of a company, and we don't record vacation time. We just say take off when you want to take off, and we encourage people to take off. And when people take off, if Carlos takes off or any of us take off, an email goes out that says, hey, Carlos is with his family. Unless you have to contact him, don't contact Carlos. That's part of the culture we have, and we really do promote people to enjoy their personal and their family life. We believe we have a number of good benefits from a company standpoint, and we plan on fully integrating the team members at the Meadows into the Pinnacle Entertainment family. Now, there are 4 work groups that are represented by labor unions that are there, and obviously we'll honor the agreements that are in place with those 4 labor unions. But for those that aren't under a collective bargaining unit, we plan on by the spring having them fully integrated into Pinnacle Entertainment's plan, which is the same plan everybody gets.
Okay. And I just have one final question. I think this is geared more towards GLPI. I was just wondering if somebody could speak very briefly on whether or not this transaction would have any effect on their REIT status as it stands right now.
No, I think this transaction won't have any effect on our REIT status. We talked about that in previous hearings. So we've been through with Rich and Cyrus and other staff members what impact certain transactions would have on our REIT tests. So I think by REIT status, the reference is really to, we have certain tests we need to meet as a company, asset and income tests to qualify as a REIT. This transaction will be relatively small to our overall portfolio. Now that we've done the transaction with Pinnacle and we've gone from 22 properties to 21 properties to 35 properties total, the impact that this transaction will have on the assets will have very little impact on our overall portfolio. And because of the fact that Pinnacle's taking all the operating assets and we're only taking real property assets, this will only positively impact our REIT tests and ratios. So it won't have any negative impact.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the board?
Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious as to whether Pinnacle has, oh, and let me say welcome to Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
It's a great state. You'll love it here. Does Pinnacle have any other steps that they take to ensure that people under the age of 21 are not allowed on the gaming floor beyond what the Meadows has already done?
I'll ask Rod to, as someone that operates at a property every day to speak to that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. We have extensive training programs with all of our team members, specifically our security staff, RU21 training, and that's renewed on a regular basis. We also incorporate software packages to help us detect fraudulent IDs and help us do a very good job of ensuring that the person giving us the ID is indeed that person. So we have a very extensive training programs that we go through on a very regular basis. The Meadows does a very good job currently today, and we will continue that and enhance it where applicable.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ruiz Sanchez, this is probably a question for you, or maybe Mr. Sanfilippo. Where does the Meadows rank using gross gaming revenue as the benchmark? Where does the Meadows rank in all of your properties? Will it be number one, number two?
It would be number 3 out of the 16.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions on benefits, and I want to drill down. And if you don't have the answers, you can send them to us later. But they're typical questions that we ask. The using benefits is just medical and a 401k plan. I didn't hear you speak to a 401k plan, I don't think, but you have a 401k. All right. So medical and a 401k plan. If you could tell me what employees qualify for those benefits. I'm assuming it's all salaried employees, and then if it's hourly, how many hours do they have to work to qualify?
32 hours.
32 hours a week. And what percentage of your employees participate in your 401k? You can give that to us later. Yeah, that's fine.
And here's what I would guess, because I do pay attention to the 401k. It is something that we feel pretty good about because of the match that we have there. Of the 15,000 team members that we have, about 6,000 of the team members participate in the 401k.
And your match on the 401k is what again? Did we talk about that?
It's 50% up to 3%.
50% up to 3%.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So you'll I'm sorry. Go back to the hourly, salaried, and part time. Who is eligible for those benefits? You said 32 hours.
Any team member that wants to participate can after a 90-day period of being with the company.
Gotcha. What percentage of your employees are hourly versus salaried company-wide? And again, you
we'll
get
have to
a
get
specific,
you more specific, but it's roughly about a quarter or so are hourly. Salaried, and the rest of them are hourly.
Okay, so about roughly a quarter salary.
And let me add, if I may, one other thing. We in July, company-wide, made the decision to move up the lowest wage we paid non-tip team members to $10.15 an hour. Now, that may not be meaningful here, but in places like Bossier City, Louisiana, Vicksburg, Mississippi, it made a really big difference. It impacted more than 2,000 of our team members who were making below $10.15 an hour. And we made that decision because we just felt like it was just difficult for people in those areas that were in those locations just to make it. And we had team members tell us they were able to move and upgrade where they live, but we pay a lot of attention to how we compensate our team members and the life that they live. And we didn't put out a press release. We didn't publicize that. That's something we did internally, and that is the lowest non-tipped wage that someone would make in our company is $10.15 an hour.
And on that, in that vein, Mr. Sanfilippo, my last question is, if you could provide us with the average wage of a salaried employee excluding benefits, and the average annual wage of an hourly employee excluding benefits. If you could get that information.
We will. We'll break that down and include what the average tip is. So we'll do it for on a hourly, non-tipped, and then tipped, and what they receive, and then we'll do the same thing on salary. We'll follow up with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just one simple question. And this question is going to go to OEC. In reviewing the application, I know you've boiled down a lot of things, but I'm just interested in their compliance record in the other 9 jurisdictions that they're operating. Did you find any significant violations in any aspect of their doing business in those jurisdictions?
What I can tell you is that any problems that they've had in other jurisdictions are typical problems that would you see.
Right, I'm saying significant.
Nothing material or significant.
Very good, thank you.
Any questions, ex officio members, please?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do have just 2 questions. For purposes of the harness racing side, what harness racing experience does the new general manager have?
We specifically for standard bred racing, Ron has overseen a racetrack with a previous company, Louisiana Downs in Louisiana, in Bossier City, Louisiana. I've been involved actually with that property. I've been involved with the other 2 that we have today, specifically with harness racing. This will be the first racetrack that we've been involved with that has harness racing.
Great, and there's just one more follow-up then. Will there be any other changes to the racing management at the Meadows?
We do not plan any other changes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? I have a question. Since you're new to Pennsylvania, so it's a little bit of just letting you know the attitude of the board. The board has become increasingly concerned about the relationship between trying to promote business as much as we can in your casinos and the question of the public safety. And for better or for worse, casinos are soft targets. And I just was wondering, in all your experience in all your other jurisdictions, what steps you've taken or contemplated to make your facilities less attractive to random acts of violence.
And I appreciate that is a focus that you have. We have at every one of our Pinnacle Entertainment properties a specific position that is risk and manager. It's a risk manager that's not at the Meadows right now. We're going to put that in place at the Meadows, and specifically, it's in place to help manage safety there. In addition to our security staff, we actually hosted it on Tuesday in Louisiana for the state of Louisiana active shooter training. So the state of Louisiana is piloting an active shooter training program. We offered our facility to do that pilot. That occurred on Tuesday morning. We're going to carry that through the rest of the properties in Louisiana, and we plan on making that program a program that goes to all of our properties in the Pinnacle Entertainment family. So we are, Donna oversees security and risk and safety for our complete company. It is, if you were to say, what is something that is constantly on my mind, it's the safety of our team members and the safety of our guests at our property. And we very much believe that we need to be eyes wide open and very active and engaged with those people that may come to a property looking to do something that they shouldn't do. And active shooter training is something that we have been pushing for to have a program put in place, and the test went well in Louisiana, and we think that is something that will be helpful, at least for people having an awareness in the event that somebody walks into a facility and does things that they shouldn't do. Roger, you're welcome to add to it.
We also did the active shooter training in Missouri at the Kansas City property as well, and I think another key is partnering with local law enforcement to make sure that we do understand every aspect of that, what to look for, and make sure our team members are aware and trained properly to make sure that we're constantly following up on that opportunity.
Well, I just raised that here, less a fair answer than to put you on notice that this is something that the board cares about deeply, and you're new to the state. We're trying to encourage that. At the same time, we don't want to do things that are necessarily going to cause people to decide that maybe they don't want to go to casinos. But I think it's a balancing act that we have to take very seriously, because first and foremost in this board's mind is the protection of the public safety.
We agree. Absolutely.
Okay. Enforcement Council, do you have any presentation this morning?
Beth Manifesto for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. We do not have a presentation. We just have a very brief statement, if I could read that.
Please.
Based upon the information and documentation that we've received as well as reviewed, the Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to the change of control, provided that it is subject to the special conditions contained in the background investigation reports authored regarding GLPI, GLP Capital LP, PNK Development 33, as well as Pinnacle. OEC also would respectfully request that should the board grant the change of control, that it would include in its order conditions 1, 2, and 3, which appear in our answer. And furthermore, because of the tailored background investigation special conditions for those 4 aforementioned entities, the board we no longer are requesting conditions 4 through 7, which appear in our answer. Those are covered within the specific burrs.
Any further questions? I gather do you have any response to the OEC's statements?
No, happy to accept the conditions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Any? What? Right. You should probably move your presentation into the record. The hard copy of your
Okay.
presentation.
Happy to. So, can we please, I'll provide you a copy of the.
Any other additional questions or comments from the board or the ex officio members?
Mr.
Thank
Chairman, I have one, please. Early on in your presentation, you talked about gifting of money back to needs within the community. And I'm interested in really 2 questions concerning that. One, how do you intend to triage those needs? There are many, and they will come to you as they've come to the Meadows management over time. So kind of what's your strategy, how you've used it at your properties to make the decision about which needs you're going to support? In other words, that's the triage question. And then secondly, concerning the amount of money that's been passed on average over the last 5 years of the Meadows to local needs, what's your intent as to that number, as to possibly increasing it?
Thank you for the question. We'll start with the first question, and that is we at all of our properties, we put together a committee that reviews each and every request. And based on that committee's recommendation is how we guide that decision process. One unique aspect, I think, and I'm not sure if every company does this or not, but we involve team members as well in that aspect of what's important in the community. You know, and as our earlier slide shows, we do focus on veterans and cancer and food for the needy, et cetera. But that's the process we employ currently. And I'm not sure of the exact number that the Meadows has done in the past, but I will give you an example. We're going to be presenting a rather large check tomorrow in the sum of $10,000 for our food. Greater Washington County Food Bank. This has been a good partner of the Meadows in the past, and we saw that and respected that, and we're going to make that donation tomorrow.
And that's from the Pinnacle Foundation.
That's correct.
That'll be our first donation in the community.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for the presentation this morning. We're going to take up a vote on this matter later under the Office of Chief Counsel section of the agenda. So thank you.
We appreciate the consideration, and we are excited about being in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Chester Downs
Yeah,
is here.
Yeah,
Are they
they're
here?
here. Yeah, they're all here. The CEO just walked in. Oh,
Okay.
during the presentation.
Do you want a break? Go on. Do this. Okay. Now take up the Chester Downs matter. Again, I'd ask anybody who's going to speak today to please state and spell your name for the court reporter before you make any statement. I would also ask any non-attorney witnesses who might be testifying to please stand and be sworn at this time.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Downey, D-O-W-N-E-Y, with Fox Rothschild on behalf of Chester Downs and Marina LLC, doing business as Harrah's Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. Mr. Chairman, we're before you this morning to discuss with you a proposed plan for capital improvements that would include a reduction of 350 slot machines from the floor and a significant capital investment program. Before I ask Ron Bauman to proceed with his testimony, I guess in the first instance, let me introduce who we have with us today.
Please.
Ron Bauman is to my left, B-A-U-M-A-N-N. Ron is the Senior Vice President and General Manager at Harrah's Philadelphia. To his left is Jacqueline Grace, G-R-A-C-E. Jacqueline is the Vice President and Assistant General Manager at the facility. And to Jacqueline's left is Enlyn Hughes. She is the Vice President and Chief Legal Officer. As I started to say before I start with with asking Ron to introduce our presentation, I'd like to a couple of points I'd like to make. First and foremost, I want to thank the board and our friends at Meadows, GLPI, and Pinnacle for accommodating our schedule this morning. We had some traffic-related tie-ups, so apologies for that. Second, I wanted to advise the board, I know that we've made Chief Counsel's Office and OEC aware of this. There is a data point error in our petition. It occurs it repeats in two places. Very specifically, our finishing square footage that we have proposed for our gaming floor is currently reflected in the petition as 106,193 square feet. That number should in fact be 104,317 square feet. That's a decrease of 1,876 square feet from where we reflected in the petition. And we're going to ask the board this morning, with no objection from OEC, to deem the petition amended to reflect that lower number. On that basis, the relief that we are requesting ultimately would contemplate a finished floor square footage of 104,317 feet.
Is there any objection from OEC on that?
No
matter?
objection.
Thank you.
I know it comes up constantly in the context of the footage. We just would flag that we've done the smoking calculation. Those numbers stay the same. We finish out at about 48.8% of the floor. And then finally, since the time of our submission of the petition, we received correspondence that Jackie Grace will speak to from the Horsemen's Association, and I will be admitting that into the record at the conclusion of our proceeding.
Okay, thank you.
With those preliminary matters, I'm going to ask Ron to take over our presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Pleasure to be here today to talk about Harrah's Philadelphia's capital plan that is intended to significantly reposition the property, improve the overall guest experience, and in the end grow revenues both for the company and tax revenues for the state. The approval that we're looking for today requires, in order to do so, the approval that we're looking for today requires a reduction in our slot count, which we'll get into. The plan on page 1 is a $7.2 million spend. About $6 million of it is geared towards hospitality offerings. It includes a reimagined F&B portfolio, a brand new sense of arrival when you come into the casino on the second floor, a brand new bar and lounge that will anchor the already built event center that's already in the back, a new gaming pit that will actually be adjacent to the bar and that event center, which we refer to as the block, and the block will be the block event center, the block bar, and the block gaming pit. And then we recently added a complete replacement of our entire casino carpet for another $1.3 million, so pretty significant spend. That does not include the maintenance spend that we would traditionally do, which is north of another $1 million. So again, a pretty significant commitment into the property. As we all know, regional gaming is evolving. It's no longer about a place where you can just come in and play a slot machine or play a table game. People are now expecting amenities, great restaurants, great bars, entertainment, some form of hotel eventually down the road people are looking for. This property is absolutely heading in this direction with this proposed capital plan. Again, in order to do so, we're looking to repurpose some of our square footage that we currently allocate to slots, primarily to non-gaming amenities, better restaurants, bigger restaurants, new restaurants, bars, and entertainment. We are asking the board for an approval to take our slot count from 2,800 units to 2,450, which is a little over a 12% reduction. I could assure you we have way too many slots on our floor. 2,800 is a lot of slot machines. You will find that number, you rarely find that slot count even in destinational markets. And we'll have a couple pages that summarize our data and thinking around that, but what I want you to bear in mind is on our busiest hour of our busiest day, our occupancy doesn't go above 65%. 3 out of 10 games sit there idle, collecting dust on our busiest hour of our busiest day. We have way too many slot machines. In the end, again, this project is intended to enhance our overall guest experience, both from a gaming perspective and a non-gaming perspective, create a much more holistic experience, a night out that's not just about gaming, but it's about gaming and other things. It will be a job creator. At the end, this project will create more jobs. And in the end, it will grow revenues both for the property and for the state. The next few slides give you an idea of what we're looking at. On the left-hand side is currently the casino as it is today. The right-hand side gives you an idea of where we're starting to evolve it. We will the front part of the building, for those of you who've been to the property on the second floor, will get an entirely new look, a new entry. The Total Reward Center, which is our loyalty center, will get a brand new look. We're adding a Starbucks up front, a new retail shop, actually 2 new retail shops, I did that for a certain member of the commission. They had a Starbucks, so I would see you more often. The next page gives you just a little bit more different view of that. If you recall, right now, you actually come up the escalators and you bump right into our casino. This actually puts it back and gives us a gateway, a pathway into the casino. People will now travel by the reward center, by the Starbucks, by the retail shop, have a non-gaming experience before they enter the gaming experience. On slide 5, we've thought very carefully about how we're approaching security. We've had a pretty good track record over the past few years of not allowing somebody under 21 on our gaming floor, and that will continue. Our current railings, which are 3 feet, will actually be 4 feet. We're actually increasing by another foot, just to be sure that we don't have anybody that can purge over the gateway. As you get towards the casino, we've created an entry with 2 security points, one on each side, just like we have today. It will continue to contain all the state-of-the-art technology we use for ID checks, which has been phenomenal. I knock on wood, but we've had a pretty good run since we squeezed in and we went to that form of technology. So again, even though we're thinking through and creating a much brighter, more warmer feeling, security is first and foremost on our mind. This will be tighter and better than even what we have today, which is also pretty good. Next slide gives you an idea of what we're doing in the back. We currently do have the box event center built in the back. It is up and operational. We are adding certain elements to that room, which are not depicted here. In front of that, we're going to build a bar. That bar is about a $2 million spend. It will be very much an entertainment-based bar. It actually will open and close where you can see inside the event center or not. So if we want that energy to come out on the floor, we can do so. If we have a ticket event, we can actually close it in and not allow you to see inside. Lots of digital content. We're going to actually offer what we call the Sue's Hap tables, which are tables that you can actually go and do social media on as you're sitting there as part of that. We're also putting a table game pit in front of that bar. So the experience will be about the entertainment center, the bar, and the table game pit. This pit actually replaces a pit we took out about a year ago. So if you look back at 2015 at our game count, we're actually less than that game count 2015. And this will be one of the first things that we actually do. We're going to construct this project from the back forward, bearing in mind thinking in terms of times of the year and construction disruption and all that. Page 7 shows our new Guy Fieri's restaurant that's going to replace the Tap and Tavern. That restaurant overlooks the track. It will continue to have views of the track. It will continue to offer betting stations for the harness racing facility. And you will have Guy Fieri as the anchor back there for this particular restaurant. It'll be the first play into a celebrity or chef restaurant for the property. We do have Guy Fieri's in a number of our properties. They are extremely successful. Page 8 shows our top views, our current Cafe Napoli. That will be replaced by a concept we're calling the Market right now. It will be about freshly prepared and customized salads, sandwiches, and pizzas. Today, people expect things to be made in front of them, fresh, and they want to tell you how they're made. And that's what this outlet will be all about. It is very much geared towards driving our core slot business. Our core slot business is typically, like everybody else, is a female in the range of 50 to 60 years old. This outlet goes towards what their palate and what our consumer insight has told us they want. Again, in terms of timing, this will be one of the last assets that come online. Page 9, when we originally submitted the OP 26, we had called out Pit 6 to be developed, that we were looking at putting electronic table games in that pit. At that point in time, we had not decided on a vendor. We have now. We're going to go with the IGT dealer-assisted product in that particular pit. We will be amending our OP post this, but just wanted to show the board with how, now that we know where we're going, what it looks like and how we're thinking about that. It'll be 24 units offering roulette and mini bock. We'll work with the various agencies of the board for the approval process and getting them online and internals and submissions and all that type of stuff. But that is what will absolutely go there. We were debating initially between Interblock and IGT, and we like the IGT product and where they are going. Page 10, again, just gives you an idea of what the floor layout will look like with 2450 units. The pathways will be much larger. The entry point in the casino will be further back, allowing people to experience the amenities. And you can see that up on point 2 up front. That's actually where you come in. The main reductions are in the back. 244 units is coming out where we're putting the bar, the entertainment facility, and the gaming pit. 70 units will come out up front. That's to allow the pathways, the Starbucks, the retail expansion, all that. And then 36 games just odd throughout to create better traffic flow, better aisleways, and those sorts of guest comfort type items. Again, this does reflect the look of where we see the electronic table game product in Pit 6. Next one, slide 11 shows what the carpet will look like. There'll be 4 different types of carpet: normal field, different carpet for table games, pathways, transition points for safety so nobody trips and falls. The carpet project will start somewhere in early November when the carpet arrives, and it'll be completed somewhere around the end of February. We'll take our time to do it. Replacing carpet is a tricky business. It will take us about 3 months to ensure there's minimal disruption. We'll do the hardest parts, i.e. the most occupied parts, in the 3 weeks of December when, quite frankly, there's no business in the market. And then we'll do the other piece in the 3 weeks in January where, quite frankly, there's no business Monday through Thursday and the dead of the winter there. And then finish the rest as the rest of the capital comes online. In the end, the property will have a much different, fresher appearance than it has today. It will be much brighter. It'll be much warmer with different colors and lots more woods than it looks today. A significant upgrade in appearance for Harrah's Philadelphia. 12 gives you an idea of smoking. Our smoking percent is going to go down from 49.8% to 48.8%, so about a 1% reduction in allowable smoking. The majority of non-smoking is all in the front, so you can come in and not have to go through smoking unless that's what you truly choose to do, for the most part, but is mainly up front in the forward portion of the gaming facility. Slides 13 and 14, Jackie's going to go over real quick. They are summary slides of the data that we presented to FIU, showing our slot occupancy, our slot performance, different forms of analysis that indicate we need far, 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 far less than 2,800 units. And I'll turn it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, Chairman. Really quickly, I'll just go through, as Ron indicated, the summary view of all of the data that we turned over. And as he said, our supply currently far exceeds demand. On average, 83% of our slot units are available, so they go unused. If you look at our busiest days and the peak times during our busiest days, which is Saturday, 66% of our slot units go unused. And I think Ron already indicated our busiest day, which was on July 3rd. We had a significant amount of our units that were still available for play. So again, the key here is that we have a lot of slot machines, a lot that we don't need. If you go to the next slide, it just talks a little bit more. It shows that we are consistently below our constrained levels. And the tolerance assumption that we're talking about is a company-wide standard, 70% to 75% optimal slot occupancy. And so what that means, in other words, if you assume a 70% optimal slot occupancy, then at 71%, that is when customers start to feel uncomfortable. So whether it's about space and having enough room to find a slot machine, finding desirable slot machines, and making sure that we have enough of them available, that's what that 70 to 75% number represents. So if you assume a 70% constrained occupancy, then if we reduce units, then we will see zero impact to our demand model showed us. If you take a more conservative approach and assume a 70% optimal slot occupancy, then it shows worst case scenario, a very, very marginal impact, which is to the tune of $7,800 annually. So literally next to nothing. So, again, as we've indicated before, we have the excess supply, and we absolutely have room to reduce slots on the floor. If you talk about the nominal impact, which is the $7,800 annually, obviously it's going to raise questions. What do the horsemen say? And as Bill indicated earlier, they've given us their approval. We have a letter that we are going to submit, but they are in support of the reduction.
The other thing I would add on our thought numbers is remember the time period from this analysis goes through April, May of last year. So that's really before the feeling of any sugar house impact from that expansion, and does not contemplate the second Philly license at all. This is well before that. And I can assure you as the sugar house people ramp up that you start feeling that impact later and later and later. And this data does not include any of that. So again, what we're looking forward to do is really transforming this property, giving it a new, fresh look. Another reason to come besides pulling on a slot handle or sitting down at a table game. At the end of the year, this capital spend will absolutely help position the property better to compete in a very competitive market. And the way the project is laid out, whether it's from the construction phasing or the carpet phasing, well, because the majority of it's either done in the back where there's almost no activity, or it's being done in the middle of December or January, will have almost no impact on revenues in the short term. And with that, I turn it over to the board for any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, before we go there, if I might add, I want to ask Ron two questions. Ron, did you have the opportunity to review the answer prepared and submitted by the Office of Enforcement Counsel and the conditions contained, the proposed conditions contained in their answer?
Yes.
And if the board were inclined to issue an approval of our petition as presented, would the property be comfortable with the conditions as they are proposed?
Yeah, we agree.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the only other point that I'd like to make, there was reference to, when we started, to the changes in the square footage. On the basis of those changes, tomorrow, if the board is inclined to approve today, we will be submitting a revised OP and a revised checklist, floor reconfiguration checklist reflecting those changes and the corresponding changes.
Thank you.
With that, thank you.
Questions or comments from Enforcement Counsel?
Glenn Stewart for the Office of Enforcement Counsel, STUART. Just very briefly, they answered a lot of questions that I had beforehand. You talked about employees maybe changing as a result of these changes. Do you anticipate increasing, decreasing the number of employees, and if increasing, decreasing, depending on what you're doing? Do you have a number of how many you plan on increasing or decreasing?
We don't have a number. We're still going through the hiring models. It certainly will be an increase. The majority of the increases will be in the food and beverage world, so bartenders, servers, hosts, those type of positions. We also do anticipate there would be incremental dealer positions, primarily for the new gaming pit.
Any changes to the security staffing due to the new changes at the front entrance?
We don't anticipate, but we'll submit our plan and OP and revised layouts like we would appropriately do and go through that approval process.
Okay. You're talking about removing some slot machines, and I know that's always a touchy subject. Does Harris have enough space on its gaming floor to add these 10 tables without removing these slot machines?
No, we do not. If people are familiar with the property, it's we don't on that gaming floor. So if we chose to, we could put them on a different gaming floor, but we all know 2 floors of gaming never works.
Okay.
So in the given footprint, we would have to decide to take out a restaurant versus what we're doing. And I would add that the two, in my mind and the property's mind, have nothing to do with each other. I would take out these slot machines no matter what we were doing. Having idle machines sitting there, that many, it just drains the energy of a building. And nobody likes to see a lot of inactivity. It doesn't feel good. Whether you go to a restaurant, whether you go to gaming, it does not feel right. And it just drains that energy. And you go to certain areas of the building when you see just seas or rows and rows of slots not being played, it doesn't create a drive to get there. So regardless of what we were doing, I would take these units out anyway.
What would be When do you anticipate beginning the construction or the changes?
We've already started the construction. The bar in the back is under construction. Guy Fieri's is under construction. We anticipate if you would, the rear portion of it. So the event center, which is having a bar added to it, the gaming pit to be opened in early December. We anticipate Guy's restaurant to be open in early November. We anticipate starting the back area with carpet in November. Then we plan on taking a break, and then the Sunday after Thanksgiving, when business traditionally drops off and you can't fight Santa Claus, we will go and we will start the front of the building and work our way backwards, and then we anticipate that being done somewhere around President's Weekend. Maybe we tail off to the end of February, depending on weather. And
so full built out, full changes, end of February is what the goal is at this point?
Yes, absolutely. Sooner the better.
Okay. And you did say, Bill, that or Mr. Dow, that you had the PHAA, the Pennsylvania Horsemen's Association endorsement for these changes?
Correct, and we will submit that into the record at the conclusion.
No further questions.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Ron, if you could just address two questions for me. On the poker floor, on your presentations, I'll call it the casino floor. Is there any discussion about changes into the horse betting area or the poker?
Yes, we are. It's a good question. We have capital to actually redo the flooring that surrounds that area. So when you enter off the elevators, or you go out onto the patio, or you visit the food court, all that flooring will be replaced. Some of it will be a hard surface, and some of it will be carpet. We're just going through final selections on that now, but I would anticipate lead time. That'll be done by the end of the year.
And second question, you had profiled the individuals who are most likely to be at your slot machines, giving us an age range and the female player. With these amenities, do you see that mix of individuals changing? Is this a demographic that you believe you can bring into a younger area? Is it your block going to have entertainment that draws a different crowd than currently playing games at?
Yeah, I'll answer it a few ways. One is the upgrades to the property and primarily the food outlet are intended, one, to further engage and entangle a slot customer and grow the slot business. So there's pieces of what we're doing that are about that, and really we use the term stickiness, to create greater stickiness for that particular customer. The block and what we're doing in the back is absolutely targeted towards a younger demographic that the property does not currently attract, or we don't attract a lot of. That tends to be a little bit different, tends to skew male, and tends to skew a little bit more on the table game end than on the slot end, and is looking for a different type of experience, something that's very social, something that's very content driven, and something that's a little bit dynamic. We all know that the industry has had a hard time getting the millennials in that segment to go and pull on a slot handle. This is a play in the opposite direction.
And just one follow-up question. Thinking about the block being at the, as you keep calling it, the back of the facility, if you had your druthers, would you have another entranceway for the block, or do you think it's helpful to have these individuals walking all the way through the facility to get to the block?
I like the idea of them walking through the facility, especially now as we start opening up other amenities out front. If you ask me that question without giving them other amenities to expand out front, I might have a different answer. But I like the idea that they have to go back, they have to pass slot machines, they have to pass other restaurants, they have to pass a gaming pit. They might wait in line as they want to get in, and then we have a chance to monetize that spend in other ways. Because the model is based upon them doing that plus one other thing. That and play tables, that and eat, that and slots. But if they just go in there and go and visit the event center and do entertainment spend, that wouldn't be as successful in our mind.
I do think, just having been in that property and walked from front to back on numerous occasions, the idea of opening up the path from the front to the back is a good thing. You can kind of meander a lot trying to get to the
Absolutely.
back, and I think that this plan will provide greater access.
Thank you. Appreciate that,
Thank you,
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Downey, just to confirm, when you talked about the amended gaming floor space of roughly 104,000 square feet, did you say that the new smoking number will be 48.8%?
Correct. The number that was in the petition, the 50,000, and I'll give you the exact number. 50,963 is the correct number. That's the finished number for the smoking area.
Okay, and that comes out to roughly, you said 48.8%, I think. Okay, thank you. Mr. Baumann, thanks for the Starbucks. I will certainly partake when I visit your property. Not to armchair quarterback, but we've gone through this with your casino and several others, but help me understand the mentality that when a slot facility or when a casino opens, there seems to be a tendency to put as many slot machines on the property as possible, and rarely. And I understand, the demographic is changing, and you mentioned before about the millennials not playing, but we've seen this reduction in slot machines by a number of properties. And again, you've done it before, and you've come before us. But what's the mentality of opening a facility with as many slot machines as you can, and then typically in our in this board seeing these retrenchments in the number of slot machines? Like, why do casinos do that? Why not just start with, okay, we've done the demographics, we understand where the trend line's going, and we're gonna start with a number of slot machines that we think creates that vibe that we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think any operator or owner would tell you they think they have the magic formula when they open up. Sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. Just in the case of Philly, I would just, to answer your question, I think just remember it started as 100% slots. So the thinking was much different. Then you had table games come along. Two, in the case of Harrah's, Philadelphia, Valley Forge was never anticipated. So that's a piece of the reduction right there. And then, thirdly, as we know across the U.S., the slot market is a struggling market. It's saturated or declining in almost every single market. So maybe there's some old thinking there that wasn't updated. I think though, as you see different properties open up or what their thinking is coming in, I mean, the second Philly license, you saw some pretty small numbers, right? 2,200, 2,400. If you go back to those various proposals, so I think that thinking is evolving some, and I also think there's just a greater understanding of analysis of what happened in the past informs the future.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, last question, just for the record, because we are, we've had mention about the Gaming Act and the restriction on reducing the number of slot machines on a gaming floor that casinos are allowed pursuant to the Gaming Act. Could you read the language into the record and just to update people who are here and watching on TV?
This is under for PACS section 13A 15 subsection 7. It says the petitioner agrees that the number of slot machines in operation at its licensed facility on October 1st, 2009 will not be permanently reduced in order to install table games.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions or comments from ex officio?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question. As the Racing Commission falls within the Department of Agriculture, Secretary Redding is concerned that the ongoing reduction of slots will have some kind of impact on the Racehorse Development Fund. Specifically, what analysis have you done with respect to the reduction on the Racehorse Development Fund for this petition?
We don't anticipate the reduction in slots having any impact on revenues. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. We're in the business of growing revenues, not doing anything other than that. We've submitted a mountain, I think, of a mountain of evidence that showcases that we don't need the number of slots we have, and we could safely remove 350, and honestly even more than that. And there would be zero impact because of that to the racing the racing fund.
Thank you.
Do you have a presentation?
We have
this
no
morning?
presentations. We would just request that the board place in its order the conditions that we had in our answer that Chester has reviewed and they've agreed to abide by moving forward for the implementation of this.
Thank you. Are there any documents that you want to move into
Chairman,
the
if we
record?
could move into the record the presentation that Ron presented, as well as a copy of the letter that we received from the PHHA in support of the petition.
Are there any final questions or comments from the board at this point? Okay, again, on this matter as well, we'll take a vote on this in the chief counsel portion of the agenda. At this moment, I'd like to take a short 5-minute recess. Oh, my God.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order at this point. By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, September 6th, for the purpose of discussing personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters being considered here today. Additionally, we just, no, that's it. I'd also like to announce that the Gaming Control Board will hold a public hearing regarding the casino license for Woodlands Fayette LLC, the operator of the Lady Luck Casino, Nemacolin, on September 14th at 10 a.m. at the Wharton Township Municipal Building located at 114 Elliotsville Road, Farmington, PA. Deadlines for registration to speak at this hearing and for receipt of public comments is noon on Monday, September 12th. Citizens and community groups and elected officials wishing to present oral or written testimony, which will become part of the evidentiary record in this matter, can register by clicking on Quick Links section of the homepage of the Gaming Control Board website. Written comments should be mailed to Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, Post Office Box 69060, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania 17106. Attention Board Clerk. Comments can also be faxed prior to the deadline, 717-265-7416. Next, we'd like to have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcript of the July 13th, 2016 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcript of the July 13th, 2016 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Under new business, we'll now hear from our Director of Human Resources, Claire Yantis.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 3 individuals. Ms. Tamara Haken and Ms. Sarah Colasar have been selected as Assistant Enforcement Counsel 1s in the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Ms. Haken and Ms. Colasar have completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and are recommended for hire by Chief Enforcement Counsel Cyrus Petrie. Mr. Joseph Ottinger has been selected for the position of Technical Field Representative assigned to Sugar House Casino. Mr. Ottinger also has completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Director of Casino Compliance Jerry Stoll. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to hire Ms. Haken, Ms. Colasar, and Mr. Ottinger as indicated.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants as proposed by the Director of Human Resources.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Doug?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Today we have 3 petitions before you for consideration. Hearings were held earlier today on 2 of the matters. The 3rd petition will be decided based upon the documents of record. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with the pleadings and any evidentiary materials included within the record. The first petition is that of Chester Downs and Marina's request for approval to modify its gaming floor. The changes requested, as we've heard, would reduce the number of slot machines on the gaming floor by 350, from 2,800 to 2,450. It would increase the number of table games by 10, from 107 to 117, and would decrease the size of the gaming floor by about 1,800 square feet. In addition to that, as we also heard, the smoking area of the gaming floor would be 48.8%, and the non-smoking 51.2% of the floor. Chester Downs and Marina has indicated they request these changes in response to market conditions and to allow it to renovate and improve non-gaming amenities, thereby hopefully improving the overall economic picture for the property. If approved, the Office of Enforcement Counsel would propose 9 conditions, all of which are outlined in OEC's answer. And based upon that, it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve the change as requested.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Chester Downs and Marina LLC's petition for approval to modify its gaming floor with the conditions referenced by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board is the joint petition of Washington Trotting Association, GLP Capital, Gaming and Leisure Properties Incorporated, Pinnacle Entertainment, and PNK Development 33, which seeks approval for a change of control related to the Meadows Casino. This matter also was heard by the board earlier this morning, and if the board approves the request as presented, GLPI and its related entities will own the real property at the Meadows and serve as landlord to Pinnacle and its related entities, which will operate the facility and be the licensee. The board's Category 1 slot machine licensee will be Washington Trotting Association, LLC, which is a subsidiary of Pinnacle. Licensure of the parties, which will assume control of the Meadows, will be presented by the Bureau of Licensing subsequent to our presentation here. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to the petition, and as they've amended earlier today, they now have 3 conditions outlined in their answer, which they request be proposed or placed on the transaction. Office of Chief Counsel would suggest that those 3 conditions are appropriate, and with that, we'd ask for a motion to approve the change of ownership.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I will be making a motion to support the change of control for this entity and recommending a $2.5 million change of control fee. But I do think it's incumbent upon our board to notify licensees and those who may choose to come into the state and operate one of the facilities that in no way, shape, or form is that $2.5 million set in stone or going to be a fee that is in perpetuity presented for each and every one of these. In fact, I believe that this board likely will consider in the future recommending a different fee, and just want to make that clear before making this motion today.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the amended joint petition for final approval of proposed change of control as described by the Office of Chief Counsel with the conditions requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that the board assess a $2.5 million change of control fee relative to this transaction.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board pertains to Maven Incorporated and Melanie Shaw. Maven Incorporated is a registered gaming service provider that has provided community outreach services to both the Rivers and Sugar House casinos. Maven is solely owned by Melanie Shaw. On July 6, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of the gaming service provider registration of Maven Incorporated after learning that Ms. Shaw, its principal, was charged by the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General with criminal offenses including theft, tampering with records, conspiracy, and deceptive business practices. The charges are not related to Maven Incorporated and services that it provided to our licensees, however. The charges stem from Ms. Shaw's role as president and CEO of Transitional Work Corporation, a nonprofit corporation that received Commonwealth funds to provide clients of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. Ms. Shaw is alleged to have misused and personally benefited from those funds, and her criminal charges are still pending. Upon being charged with the offenses, the board's executive director imposed an emergency suspension on Maven and Ms. Shaw. Shaw has waived her right to a formal hearing on the validity of the emergency suspension, thereby allowing the board to consider whether or not the suspension should continue during this time period, and that's the matter currently before the board.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board continue the emergency suspension of Maven Incorporated and Melanie Shaw's gaming service provider registration for the reasons described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good morning or afternoon, whatever it is.
Still have another 4 minutes.
Make it quick.
The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals and entities: Virginia McDowell, Insight Direct USA, Inc., Christopher Banak, Michael Stephen Bowman, Fortress GLPI Voteco LLC, Randall Allen Nardone, John A. Godfrey, Roy Kelsey Alexander Allison, and Lynn Swan. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objections to any of these petitions, and as a result, if the board were to inclined to grant same, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of the persons or entities that have made the request.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 6 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. In each case, the person that is the subject of the report and recommendation has been notified that the board was going to take the matter up today and that they could come forward and briefly address the board. If any of these persons are present and do wish to address the board, they should come forward when their name is called. Alex Guzman is the first report and recommendation before the board today. Ms. Guzman was issued a gaming permit in January of 2014 and worked as a table games dealer at the Mount Airy Casino. On May 31st, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Ms. Guzman's gaming permit after learning that she had been charged with several drug-related crimes, a weapons charge, and traffic violations. Specifically, she was pulled over after she was observed driving excessively and swerving, and excessive speed and swerving, and during interaction with police, she allowed a search of her vehicle, at which time illegal drugs were found. A hearing on the validity of the emergency suspension, which the executive director imposed as a result of this arrest, was held on June 14th, 2016. Despite receiving notice, Ms. Guzman did not attend the hearing. As a result, the only evidence put in was evidence supporting OEC's request for the emergency suspension and relating to her arrest. And as a result, the report and recommendation before the board today recommends that her suspension remain in effect.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Alexis Guzman's gaming employee permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Datone Nguyen is the next report and recommendation before the board. Mr. Nguyen was issued a gaming employee permit on June 15th, 2015 and worked as a table games dealer at Harrah's, Philadelphia. On December 15th of 2015, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to revoke Mr. Nguyen's gaming permit and a petition to place him on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Upon learning that, while patronizing the Parks Casino, which was not the casino where he was employed, but obviously another facility, he was observed playing Spanish 21 poker, which is authorized under the regulations. However, he was capping bets while playing and did so on 4 occasions. As a result of that conduct, he was charged and pleaded guilty to 1 count of disorderly conduct. Mr. Nguyen requested a hearing as to OEC's request to revoke his license and place him on the exclusion list. He attended the hearing, did not testify, but upon giving the opportunity to make a closing argument, basically just said that he'd made a mistake. He was sorry, but he conceded all of the facts alleged. Notwithstanding his statements, the report and recommendation issued recommends that his license be revoked and he be placed on the board's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? For the future, whenever I do that, that includes the ex officios, okay? I'm trying to shorten the process. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the revocation of Datone Wynn's gaming employee permit and his placement on the involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation pertains to Derek Ramirez. Mr. Ramirez was issued a gaming employee permit in 2012 and is currently employed as a table games dealer at Mount Airy. In February of 2015, Mr. Ramirez was arrested for violating a protection from abuse order. He was subsequently found to be in contempt of that order. Consequently, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a warning letter upon Mr. Ramirez the following June, reminding him that he needs to comply with court orders and maintain his suitability if he wished to maintain his gaming permit. 2 months after receiving that warning, in August of 2015, Mr. Ramirez was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. As a result, OEC filed a complaint to suspend Mr. Ramirez's gaming permit for 1 week. Mr. Ramirez requested a hearing, which was held on both May 18th and then continued until June 2nd of 2016. At the hearing, Mr. Ramirez basically acknowledged his conduct, but indicated that he was taking care of his 4-year-old child, and as a result, he was afraid a 7-day suspension or a 1-week suspension, as requested by OEC, would cause him to lose his job, and asked for something less. The hearing officer ultimately recommends a 2-day suspension, and that's the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Derek Ramirez gaming employee permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board pertains to a request to recover winnings from a person on the excluded and self-excluded list. On May 5th, 2013, a person with the initials SH placed himself on the board's voluntary self-exclusion list for a period of 1 year. At that time, he completed the paperwork, which indicated or included acknowledging that were he to enter a casino and be found on a casino floor, any winnings would be confiscated. Notwithstanding that fact, on January 27th, he was on the gaming floor at Parks, won a jackpot of $1,250. When Parks staff attempted to pay the jackpot, they became aware that he was on the voluntary and involuntary exclusion list. As a result, Pennsylvania State Police were notified. The $1,250 jackpot was confiscated along with $90 in credits that were on the slot machine. As indicated, SH subsequently petitioned for a return of this money. A hearing was scheduled. He did not appear at the hearing, and as a result, the only persons putting in evidence was Enforcement Counsel, which supported the idea of confiscating all of this money. And as a result, the recommendation of the hearing officer is that indeed the money remain in the coffers of the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding SH's petition to recover winnings while on the self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation pertains to Jessica Thornton's petition to lift the suspension of her gaming permit. Ms. Thornton was issued a gaming permit on July 15th, 2014, and was employed as a cage cashier at the Rivers Casino. In December of 2015, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension of Ms. Thornton's permit after receiving notice that she had been arrested and charged with felony theft-related offenses stemming from allegations that she, along with 2 other individuals, attempted to shoplift over $1,000 in merchandise from a department store. A hearing on the emergency suspension was held in January of 2016. At that time, Ms. Thornton testified that she was asked to carry a bag but did not know that one of the persons she was with put unpaid merchandise in the bag. Notwithstanding that testimony, because the felony charges remained pending against her, the board kept the suspension in place. She is now requesting that the board lift the suspension as she has pleaded guilty to summary retail theft, and the felony is no longer pending against her. She is indicating at this time that she maintains her innocence, but on the advice of counsel, she pleaded guilty to the summary offense rather than a felony or misdemeanor. The hearing officer who held this hearing ultimately found her testimony to be credible and recommends to the board that her suspension be lifted and her gaming employee permit be reinstated.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Jessica Thornton's petition to lift the suspension of her gaming employee permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Christopher Tran. On January 8th, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to place Mr. Tran on the exclusion list, alleging that this past October, while gaming at Harrah's, he successfully capped wagers on several occasions and attempted to do so on several others. Upon being caught by his dealer, his prior play was reviewed, and it was shown that during 7 hours of play, he capped several bets and unlawfully won $85, which he was not entitled to. He was thereafter permanently evicted from Harrah's and charged criminally. In December of 2015, he pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. Mr. Tran requested a hearing. He attended the hearing and testified, indicating basically that the incidents occurred, they were a mistake on his part, and he sought to not be placed on the list. Notwithstanding that testimony, the recommendation to the board is that he indeed be placed on the list.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the placement of Christopher Tran on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters of the
Thank
Office
you,
of Chief
gentlemen.
Counsel.
Now we have Sue Hensel, Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be the licensure related to the Category 1 change of control, 1 table game manufacturer renewal license, 1 slot machine manufacturer designee license, 1 conditional gaming junket enterprise license, 1 gaming-related gaming service provider renewal certification, and 600 principal key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 15 gaming service provider applicants. The first matters for your consideration are the principal licenses associated with the change of control of Washington Trotting Association, Inc. Under the change of control, the operating assets and gaming license of Washington Trotting Association will be owned by Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc., while the real estate assets will be owned by Gaming and Leisure Properties, Inc. Pursuant to board requirements for approval of a change of control, both Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc. and Gaming and Leisure Properties, Inc. and their principals are required to be licensed by the board. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the 2 companies and their principals, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider licensure of Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc. and Gaming and Leisure Properties, Inc. and their associated principals.
Thank you. Any comments from Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection, subject to the special conditions outlined in the background investigation reports, which Pinnacle and GLPI have indicated they are in support of.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the licensure of Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc. and its principals as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the renewal of the Dynamic Gaming Systems LLC table game manufacturer license. Dynamic is a New Jersey-based company that manufactures the electronic Shack Blackjack table game. Dynamic has asked that the board grant it a reduced licensing fee for its table game manufacturer license. The renewal licensing fee for a manufacturer is normally $90,000 for a 3-year license. Under the Gaming Act, the board may modify a fee for a table game manufacturer if it determines that the fee will unreasonably limit table game devices or associated equipment. Consistent with this provision of the Act, the Bureau of Licensing has adopted a reduced licensing fee policy which has been presented to the board previously. Dynamic has requested a reduced fee of $30,000, which is consistent with the Bureau's policy. The Bureau of Licensing recommends that the board grant the reduced licensing fee. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have also provided you with a draft order.
I ask that the board consider the order approving a renewal table game manufacturer license for Dynamic, including the reduced licensing fee.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of Dynamic Gaming System LLC's table game manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration is the approval of a slot machine manufacturer designee license for Able Personnel, Inc. Able is a central Pennsylvania-based company that provides staffing and recruitment services. The company will serve as a manufacturer designee for IGT Global Solutions, which operates the central control computer system. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I've provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the slot machine manufacturer designee license.
Enforcement Council?
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the slot machine manufacturer designee license of Able Personnel, Inc. as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, there is the application for a conditional gaming junket enterprise license for MES Travel and Junkets, Inc. MES Travel and Junkets, Inc. is a Charlestown, South Carolina-based travel and junket business. Pursuant to the board's statement of policy, the board may issue a conditional gaming junket enterprise license provided the applicant meets certain criteria, including submitting a completing application, being licensed in good standing in a gaming jurisdiction whose licensing standards are recognized by the PGCB, and passing a preliminary review. The company satisfies these criteria for conditional licensure. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report for the applicant, and I've also provided you with a draft order. I ask that the board consider the approval of a conditional license for MES Travel and Junkets, Inc.
Enforcement Council?
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the conditional gaming junket enterprise license of MES Travel and Junkets Incorporated as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration is the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider renewal certification for Mask Publishing, Inc. Mask Publishing is a Colorado-based business that develops table games and side bets. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider certification renewal for Mask Publishing, Inc.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of Mask Publishing, Inc.'s gaming-related gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the approval of principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 5 principal and 6 key employee licenses. I ask that the board consider the order approving the licenses.
Enforcement Council?
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 4 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 365 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 170 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of gaming employee permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are recommendations of denial for 2 gaming and 2 non-gaming employee applicants. In each case, the applicant failed to request a hearing within the specified time period. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Counsel continues to request denial in each instance.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are withdrawal requests for key gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with a list of 3 key, 32 gaming, and 10 non-gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the withdrawals as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers: No Limit Steaks doing business as Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Surfast Construction Company, Inc., and Supreme Distributors, Inc., doing business as Supreme Lobster and Seafood Company. I provided the board with an order and ask that you approve these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 12 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, sir.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 20 matters for the board's consideration today, consisting of 1 consent agreement, 4 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 13 involuntary exclusions. I will note that item number 15 we'll ask that it be removed from the agenda. That individual has requested a hearing, and in speaking with Mr. Cook, a hearing date will be set by the Office of Hearings and Appeal to give that individual hearing. So we'll present 20 matters and skip over item 15.
Thank you.
Okay. The first matter on the board for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sugar House HSP Gaming LP, doing business as Sugar House Casino, and Holdings Acquisition Co. LP, doing business as Rivers Casino. The matter will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel James Armstrong.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement reached between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sugar House and Rivers Casinos in regard to them failing to timely notify the board of a change in their ownership. On October 8th of 2014, the Bureau of Licensing referred potential violations of the Gaming Act to the Office of Enforcement Counsel, alleging that Sugar House and Rivers may have violated their statements of conditions, Condition 19 specifically, by not timely notifying the board prior to or immediately upon changing its ownership structures. According to the Bureau of Licensing referrals, the ownership interests in Sugar House and Rivers Casinos, held by 3 licensed trusts, were transferred to 3 newly created but not licensed trusts on October 14, 2013. The creation of these new trusts and the transfer of ownership interests were not reported to the board until June 30, 2014. A subsequent Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement investigation into the matter confirmed that 3 previously unlicensed trusts were transferred ownership percentages that would require licensure, that the trust transactions were completed because of tax implications, and that all of the individuals associated with the trust were licensed by the board. Sugar House and Rivers Casinos allowed 8 months to elapse before notifying the board of the change in ownership. 3 new trusts that were required to be licensed by the board held ownership interests in Sugar House and Rivers casinos from October 14, 2013 through July 14, 2014 without being licensed or having applications pending before the board. This is a violation of their statement of conditions, the act, and the board's regulations. Sugar House and Rivers reported that their joint principal entity, Rush Street Gaming, has taken steps to assure that persons responsible for changes in ownership of casinos-related properties do not in the future act without notifications to those responsible for gaming compliance. Commissioners, if approved, this will be the first penalty assessed against Sugar House and Rivers casinos for violating provisions of the Act and Board's regulations in regard to reporting changes in ownership. The Office of Enforcement Counsel asks that the Board approve the consent agreement and stipulation of settlement entered into between the parties. The terms of the settlement agreement include a provision that Sugar House and Rivers Casino shall pay a joint civil penalty of $30,000 for their violations in regard to their changes in ownership and $5,000 for costs incurred by the Office of Enforcement Counsel and other board personnel. Mr. Donnelly's here on behalf of Sugar House Casino. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Good afternoon. John Donnelly, Donnelly. Sounds bad, but let me tell you what happened. In conjunction with the license renewal for Rivers, we filed a list of the entities that were owners. We discovered, with the help of licensing, because my office didn't know it, that there were 3 new trusts. And what had happened is the trusts that owned an interest in both casinos were trusts that Neil Bloom set up, or his children, I'm sorry, Neil Bloom's children set up for their children, Neil Bloom's grandchildren. They were generation skipping trusts. The accountants for those trusts in 2013 discovered that there had been some investments that may no longer allow those trusts to be tax exempt, generation tax exempting. The original trust documents that had been before the board and everyone else provided that the trusts could be divided into new trusts, perhaps in anticipation of tax issues in the future. So the tax lawyers did it. They said, well, the trust has been approved. It can be divided by its own terms. We'll divide it. And they never realized that it had potential ramifications in this way. So when we learned of it, we communicated with the tax lawyers and said, no, you can't do that ever again. If there's ever a situation, although it's provided for in the documents, and by the way, no IRS ramifications, no new qualifiers, all the people, all the human beings who were qualifiers and licensed continue to be the same people. The beneficiaries are the same, the grantors are the same, grandchildren all underage except for one kid who turned 18 recently. So now we've communicated, you can't do that because if and as and when there's ever a change in control, albeit even if it's something like reshuffling the deck chairs on the same boat, you have to notify us so we can notify the gaming board. I'm confident that everybody's aware of that now, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel, Sugar House HSP Gaming LP, and Holdings Acquisition Company LP as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next 6 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed complaints seeking the revocation of 3 gaming permits, one non-gaming registration, as well as the suspension of 1 gaming permit and 1 non-gaming registration issued to individuals by the board. Each complaint has been properly filed with the Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individuals named in the complaint. Each individual has failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Thereby, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for board consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Chairman, Commissioners, the next matter for consideration is revocation of Sean O'Donnell's non-gaming employee registration on April 28th, 2016. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. O'Donnell's non-gaming employee registration. Mr. O'Donnell, while on duty at the Lucky Red Bar, was recorded twice on surveillance stealing money intended for Sugar House Casino. Mr. O'Donnell was terminated from Sugar House Casino for violating the company's standards of conduct. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board enter judgment upon default and revoke Mr. O'Donnell's non-gaming employee registration.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the revocation of Sean O'Donnell's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Chairman, Commissioners, the next matter on the agenda is a motion to consider revocation of Stephen Reeves' gaming employee permit. Mr. Reeves, while on duty as a midi baccarat dealer, was recorded on surveillance stealing 5 $100 gaming chips from a float and secreting them in his front pants pocket while dealing the game. Further investigation revealed Mr. Reeves had stolen $100 chips on 2 other occasions for a total of $900 while dealing midi baccarat at Sugar House Casino. Mr. Reeves was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police and charged with the thefts. Mr. Reeves was terminated from Sugar House Casino for the thefts. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board enter judgment upon default and revoke Mr. Reeves' gaming permit.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the revocation of Stephen Reeves' gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, John Crowe, CROHE, again for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter before the board is a motion to consider the suspension of the non-gaming registration held by Lamont Powell. He was charged with felony aggravated assault and misdemeanor simple assault after police responded to a call regarding alleged domestic violence. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now asks that his non-gaming registration be suspended.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the suspension of Lamont Powell's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board is a motion to consider the suspension of the gaming permit held by Antoinette Bennett. She was charged with felony robbery, felony criminal conspiracy, 2 counts of misdemeanor theft, misdemeanor simple assault, and summary harassment. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now asks that her gaming permit be suspended.
Questions or comments from the board? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the suspension of Antoinette Bennett's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. David Tepper, TEPPER, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for your consideration is a complaint to revoke the gaming employee permit of Victor Streety. Mr. Streety has been convicted of statutory sexual assault created as a second-degree felony, and at this point, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke Mr. Streety's gaming employee permit.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the revocation of Victor Streety's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for revocation involving Jillian Benderovich. Ms. Benderovich was employed as a cage cashier at Parks Casino and permitted as a gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint on May 4th, 2016 to revoke Ms. Benderovich's gaming employee permit after she was criminally charged with theft for stealing money from both Parks Casino and her fellow employees while working at Parks Casino. This time, the charges remain pending against Ms. Benderovich. The Office of Enforcement Counsel would ask the board to consider the revocation of Jillian Benderovich's gaming employee permit.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board issue an order to approve the revocation of Jillian Benderovich's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining 13 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Thereby, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for board consideration.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded person list involving Julian Benderovich. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Benderovich on the exclusion list on May 4, 2016 for the previously described activity of stealing money from Parks Casino and also from her fellow employees during the course of her employment at Parks Casino. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asks that the board place Jillian Benderovich on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Jillian Benderovich to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Chairman, Commissioners, the next matter on the agenda is a motion to consider board order to add Joseph Morlino to the board's involuntary exclusion list. On April 13th of 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition seeking to place Mr. Morlino on the board's excluded persons list. Mr. Morlino was involved in an altercation with another patron during the blackjack game at Sugar House Casino on March 9th of 2016. Additionally, on December 3rd of 2001, Mr. Morlino was convicted in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania on 3 counts of the racketeer influenced and corrupt organization act. Mr. Morlino was sentenced to 168 months in prison, 3 years of supervised release, a $25,000 fine, ordered to pay $337,943.89 in restitution, and issued a special assessment of $800. Mr. Morlino has been identified as a member of organized crime by various law enforcement agencies. Mr. Morlino has returned to Pennsylvania casinos several times since the incident at Sugar House Casino on March 9th, and has subsequently been indicted on new federal charges that are currently pending. Mr. Morlino did not request a hearing in response to the petition. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board enter judgment upon default and place Mr. Morlino on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Joseph Merlino to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. Next matter on the agenda is a motion to consider the board order of Stephen Reeves to the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Reeves was previously described in the revocation proceeding. On March 29th, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition seeking to place Mr. Reeves on the board's excluded persons list. Mr. Reeves, as previously stated, while on duty at Sugar House Casino as a mini baccarat dealer, was recorded on surveillance stealing 5 $100 chips from a float and secreting them in his front pants pocket while dealing the game. Further investigation revealed that he had stolen a total of $900 in $100 chips at 2 previous occasions while dealing mini baccarat at Sugar House Casino. Mr. Reeves was arrested for the theft charges and he was also discharged from Sugar House Casino for the thefts. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that Mr. Reeves be placed on the involuntary exclusion list.
Question or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Stephen Reeves to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L. The next matter for your consideration is that of Desmond Jones. On April 4th, 2015, September 14th, 2015, and April 16th, 2016, Mr. Jones engaged in card switching and bet capping at both Harrah's Philadelphia and Parks Casino. At this time, OEC would request the board place Desmond Jones on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Desmond Jones to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. Glenn Stewart again for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next for the board's consideration is the placement of John Frankowski on the exclusion list. Mr. Frankowski capped multiple bets while wagering at Harris Philadelphia Casino as well as at Sugar House Casino. As such, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board place John Frankowski on the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of John Frankowski to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for the board's consideration is the placement of Gary Taylor Jr. on the exclusion list. Mr. Taylor followed a patron home from a casino, assaulted the patron in her driveway, and took the patron's purse containing winnings from the casino. Mr. Taylor subsequently pled guilty to a robbery charge on October 16, 2016 in relation to his actions. As such, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board place Gary Taylor Jr. on the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Gary Taylor Jr. to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Again, David Tepper with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a petition to place Nicholas Cesari on the board's exclusion list. In April 2016, Mr. Cesari attempted to use a fake ID to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy. He was subsequently cited by the Pennsylvania State Police and pled guilty, and at this time, OEC requests that the board add Nicholas Cesari to the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Nicholas Cesari to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Cesari may petition for removal from the list at any time after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next for the board's consideration is a petition to place Andrew Compton on the board's exclusion list. In May 2016, Mr. Compton attempted to use a fake ID to gain access to Mount Airy. He was also subsequently cited by the state police and pled guilty. And at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Andrew Compton to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Andrew Compta to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Compta may petition for removal from the list anytime after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next two matters, Oliver Muftadi and Joseph Tarani, arise out of the same fact pattern. With your permission, I would like to address the fact pattern as one and then each default individually. In January 2016, Oliver Muftadi and Joseph Tarani visited Mount Airy Casino together. Mr. Muftadi used the ID of his brother to gain access to the gaming floor and play blackjack for approximately 36 minutes. Mr. Tarani unsuccessfully attempted to use a fake ID to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy. Mr. Muftadi was caught because he was identified as being underage by his friend. Mr. Muftadi and Mr. Tarani were both cited by the state police. Mr. Muftadi pled guilty, and the case against Mr. Tarani is currently pending. At this time, OEC requests that the board add Oliver Muftadi to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Oliver Muftadi to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Muftadi may petition for removal from the list any time after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In regards to Mr. Tarani, at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Joseph Tarani to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the board? I have one question. Are Mr. Tarani and Mr. Muftadi still friends?
Neither of them have communicated with me.
I see. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Jonathan Tarani to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Tarani may petition for removal from the list anytime after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good afternoon. Kim Adams for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next two matters to the board's consideration arise from the same fact pattern. With the board's permission, I'll present one fact pattern and then ask for placement of each individual on the excluded persons list. In March of 2016, a guest at the Mohegan Sun Pocono Hotel contacted the front desk reporting that she and her friend Jeremiah Atkinson were being held at gunpoint by Christopher Nyman inside a hotel room. Mohegan Sun Pocono Security and the Plains Township Police Department were contacted and responded to the situation. After the situation resolved itself, Mr. Atkinson's hotel room was searched and a stolen firearm was found. He was criminally charged with felony gun charges and his charges are still pending. Mr. Nyman was criminally charged with aggravated assault and other related charges, and his charges are still pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Jeremiah Atkinson be placed on the excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Jeremiah Atkinson to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Christopher Nyman be placed on the excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Christopher Nyman to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the placement of Akeem Miller on the board's involuntary excluded persons list. In December of 2015, while at Mohegan Sun Pocono, Mr. Miller got into an argument with other guests at the bus entrance. During this argument, Mr. Miller retrieved a gun from his vehicle. He was criminally charged with various felony gun offenses and subsequently pled guilty to one offense. This time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Mr. Miller be placed on the excluded persons list.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Akeem Yamir Miller to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you all very much. Next, we're going to have our public comment period. As I understand it, Dan Vogler, Chairman of the Lawrence County Commissioners, is present. Would like to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you and the members of the board, the ex officio members, and all of the staff. I'm very grateful that you're allowing me this opportunity to briefly provide some comments, which, again, I very much appreciate. This will most likely be the last public meeting that I'll be attending of this board. As you know, I've been coming to these meetings now for quite some time. Actually, I look back and in my records and began attending these meetings in 2008 when Judge Collins chaired the board. And actually, and beyond that, upon further review, have been attending meetings of the former Harness Racing Commission since 2005. Put a lot of miles on the car during those times. But I need to note that while I'm certainly disappointed that none of the applicants who attempted to secure a license for a facility in my home county were able to bring their proposed project to fruition, I do take comfort in knowing that the gaming board and the staff were very fair, very thorough, and very patient in their review and decision-making processes. During the past 8 years, I've learned a great deal about the gaming industry and the means by which it is regulated. And accordingly, I've developed a very healthy respect for this board and your predecessors and the many staff members who take their role very seriously in what they do. In closing, I do want to note on more of a personal level that if any of you happen to travel out in the western end of the state, please know that the welcome mat is always out at the Lawrence County Courthouse, and you're always welcome to stop by. I'm grateful for the many friendships I've made along the way during these past years. And moreover, I'm certainly hopeful that our paths will someday cross again. So thank you so much for the many courtesies that you've all shown me. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, and that was extraordinarily generous of you to come in to make those comments. Anybody else have any comments at this time? Thank you very much. Are there any other public comments at this moment? Okay, that concludes today's meeting. Our next scheduled public meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 5th at 10 o'clock in this room. Any other final comments from the board or ex officio members? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.